Ozzy Osbourne had performed thousands of concerts over 50 years. He had sung in front of millions of fans. He had survived every kind of technical disaster. Microphones failed, instruments broke, stages collapsed. But none of that compared to what he experienced that night in London. Because this time, the problem wasn't with the technology. The problem was in Ozzy's own mind. In the middle of his most beloved song, the words disappeared. Lyrics he had known by heart for 40 years suddenly became unreachable. Parkinson's, age, exhaustion. It all made its weight felt in that moment. Ozzy stopped. He lowered his microphone, and 20,000 people held their breath. What happened next reminded everyone that music isn't just about performance, it's about sharing. No one at London's O2 Arena that September evening in 2022 expected to witness one of rock history's most vulnerable and beautiful moments. Not the fans who had traveled from around the world, not the crew who had set up the elaborate stage, not even Sharon Osbourne, watching from the wings with a mixture of pride and concern. But sometimes the most meaningful moments happen when everything goes wrong. September 2022, backstage at London's O2 Arena, Ozzy Osbourne sat in his dressing room, staring at his reflection. At 73 years old, he looked tired. The last few years had been brutal. A Parkinson's disease diagnosis in 2019, a serious fall that required multiple surgeries, the pandemic shutting down tours, physical therapy sessions that left him exhausted, and through it all, the constant question, could he still do this? Sharon sat beside him, as she had for over 40 years. She knew what he was thinking before he said it. What if I forget the words? Ozzy asked quietly, his Birmingham accent still thick after decades away from home. It wasn't an unreasonable fear. Memory issues were one of the symptoms of Parkinson's. Some days were better than others. Sometimes the lyrics came easily, flowing like they always had. Other times he'd reach for a word and find nothing there. It was terrifying for a man whose entire life had been built on performing. You won't forget, Sharon said firmly, taking his hand. You've sung these songs thousands of times. Your body knows them, even if your mind has a moment. And if you do forget, so what? You're Ozzy Osbourne. They love you no matter what. But Ozzy wasn't so sure. The audience had paid good money to see him perform. They deserved his best. And what if his best wasn't good enough anymore? His longtime guitarist, Zakk Wylde, stopped by the dressing room. Zakk had been playing with Ozzy since the late 80s. He'd seen Ozzy at his highest highs and lowest lows. Boss, Zakk said, you ready to do this? Ozzy looked up at him. What if I mess up? Zakk laughed. Then you mess up. We'll figure it out. We always do. He paused. You know what I've learned playing with you all these years. It's not about being perfect. It's about being real. That's why people love you. You're real. Tommy Clufetus, the drummer, and Chris Chaney, the bassist, echoed the sentiment when they gathered for their pre-show huddle. They had all worked with legends, but there was something special about Ozzy. He wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. He was just trying to share his music with people who loved it. Look, Tommy said, we've got your back out there. If something goes sideways, we adjust. That's what being a band means. The truth was, everyone on the crew knew this tour was different. This wasn't the invincible Ozzy of the 80s, or even the resilient Ozzy of the 2000s. This was a man fighting his body's decline, determined to give his fans one more tour, one more chance to share the music that had defined his life. As showtime approached, Ozzy went through his warm-up routine, vocal exercises that his voice coach had taught him, gentle stretches for his back, which still hurt from the surgeries, a few moments of meditation to center himself, and prayer, something he'd returned to in recent years, asking for strength to get through just one more show. At 8:07 p.m., the lights went down. The crowd's roar was deafening, and Ozzy Osbourne walked onto that stage, determined to give them everything he had left. The opening songs went well. Bark at the Moon got the crowd moving. The energy in the arena was electric. For those first few songs, Ozzy felt strong. His voice held up. The lyrics came naturally. Maybe tonight would be okay. Maybe he had worried for nothing. He bantered with the crowd between songs, his natural charisma shining through despite his physical challenges. "How you doing, London?" he shouted, and the response was thunderous. This was home territory, close to Birmingham, where he'd grown up. These fans had been with him from the beginning.
"I've got to tell you," Ozzy said, "getting old is a bitch. But you know what? I'm still here, and so are you, so let's make some bloody noise."
The band launched into Mr. Crowley, and the crowd sang along with every word. Ozzy fed off their energy, feeling younger than he had in years. This was why he did it. This connection with people through music. Nothing else in life had ever given him this feeling. Sharon watched from the side of the stage, her usual position during shows. She'd been managing him since 1979, and in all those years, she'd learned to read his body language. She could tell when he was struggling, when the pain was too much, when he needed a break. But right now, he looked good, strong, even. Maybe the medication adjustment was working. Maybe he really could do this. The set list was carefully planned. They'd put the most physically demanding songs early in the show, when Ozzy had the most energy. As the concert progressed, they'd gradually shift to songs that required less movement, less vocal strain. It was a delicate balance between giving the fans what they wanted and protecting Ozzy's health. But there was one song that had to be in the middle of the set. "Mama, I'm Coming Home." It was one of Ozzy's most personal songs, written during a time when Sharon had been diagnosed with cancer. It meant everything to both of them, and the fans loved it. It was the emotional centerpiece of every show. As they approached that point in the set list, Ozzy felt a twinge of nervousness. This song required real emotional vulnerability. He had to be fully present, fully connected, and lately that had been harder. The Parkinson's medication sometimes made him feel disconnected, like he was watching himself from outside his body. But he took a deep breath, looked out at the sea of faces, and nodded to the band. This was it. The opening notes of "Mama, I'm Coming Home" filled the arena. Lighters and phone flashlights appeared throughout the crowd, creating a sea of light. Ozzy began to sing, his voice carrying the weight of decades of experience, of love, of loss. "Times have changed and times are strange. Here I come, but I ain't the same." The first verse came perfectly. His voice was strong, the emotion real. The crowd swayed, many singing along. This was the moment they'd been waiting for. Then came the second verse, as he opened his mouth to sing the next line, and nothing came. The melody was in his head, but the words were gone, completely, utterly gone. He stood there, microphone raised, mouth open, and no sound emerged. The band kept playing, following the arrangement as rehearsed, but Ozzy wasn't singing. Tommy noticed it first from behind the drum kit. Something was wrong. Ozzy never paused this long. He looked at Zach, who had also noticed. Zach kept playing, his fingers moving automatically through the chords he'd played thousands of times, but his eyes were on Ozzy. On stage, Ozzy's mind was racing. What were the words? He knew this song. He'd written it. He'd sung it at his wedding anniversary. He'd performed it at charity events. The words were somewhere in his brain, but he couldn't access them. It was like trying to open a locked door without the key. Panic started to set in. 20,000 people were watching. This was being recorded. This would be online within hours. Everyone would see that he couldn't remember the words to his own song. Everyone would say he was too old, too sick, that he should retire. His hands started to shake, not from the Parkinson's this time, but from pure fear. This was every performer's nightmare, and it was happening to him live in front of thousands of people. Sharon saw it from the side stage. Her heart clenched. She started to move forward, thinking she might need to stop the show, but something made her pause. pause. Wait, just wait and see. Ozzy lowered his microphone. He looked out at the crowd, and in that moment he made a decision. He couldn't fake it. He couldn't pretend everything was fine. So he did the only thing he could do. He was honest. He raised the microphone again and said, "I'm sorry, folks. I've completely forgotten the bloody words." There was a moment of stunned silence. And then something unexpected happened. From the front row, a voice started singing. Then another. Then another. Within seconds, the entire arena was singing the lyrics that Ozzy couldn't remember.
"Mama, I'm coming home. I'm coming home."
The sound was overwhelming. 20,000 voices, all singing together, carrying the song that Ozzy couldn't finish. They weren't angry. They weren't disappointed. They were helping. Ozzy stood there, tears starting to stream down his face. He had been so afraid that forgetting the words would be the end, proof that he was finished. But instead, the crowd had turned it into something beautiful. They weren't just an audience anymore. They were part of the performance. He started to conduct them, his hands moving through the air, guiding their voices. The band adjusted their playing, bringing the volume down so the crowd's singing could be heard clearly. Zach looked at Tommy and Chris, and they all understood without words. This was no longer Ozzy's song. It belonged to all of them. The verses Ozzy couldn't remember, the crowd sang. When he could remember a line, he'd join in. When his mind went blank again, he'd let them carry him. It became a conversation, a collaboration between the performer and the performed for. Sharon, watching from the side, had tears streaming down her face. In 40 years of managing Ozzy, she had never seen anything like this. This wasn't a perfect performance. It was something better. It was real human connection. When they reached the chorus again, Ozzy found his voice. The simple repeated words, "Mama, I'm coming home," those he remembered, and he sang them with every ounce of emotion he had. The crowd sang with him, 20,000 voices and one legendary voice, united in the music. As the song came to its end, the final notes hanging in the air, Ozzy stood there, overwhelmed. The applause that followed wasn't just appreciation for a performance. It was something deeper. It was love, pure and simple. "Thank you," Ozzy said into the microphone, his voice breaking. "Thank you so much. You don't know what that means to me. You really don't." He paused, wiping his eyes. "I'm 73 years old. I've got Parkinson's disease. Some days my body doesn't work right. Some days my brain doesn't work right. But you lot," he gestured to the crowd, "you make it all worthwhile. Every struggle, every surgery, every moment of pain. It's worth it to stand here with you." The arena erupted again. People were crying, hugging strangers, holding up signs that read, "We love you, Ozzy, and you'll never walk alone." What happened next showed why Ozzy had remained relevant for over 5 decades. Instead of being embarrassed, instead of letting the moment define him negatively, he embraced it. "You know what?" he said with a grin. "Let's do that again. But this time, I'll try to remember more words." The crowd laughed, and the band launched into another song. The energy had shifted. It was no longer about a perfect performance. It was about being present together, sharing the moment, imperfections and all. After the concert, backstage, Ozzy sat in his dressing room, physically exhausted but emotionally uplifted. The rest of the band came in, and instead of commiserating about the forgotten lyrics, they were excited. "Boss, that was incredible," Zach said. "That moment when the crowd started singing, I've never experienced anything like that." Tommy nodded. It was more powerful than if everything had gone perfectly. It was real. It was human. Sharon sat next to Ozzy, holding his hand. "You gave them a gift tonight," she said. "You showed them that vulnerability isn't weakness. You showed them that even legends are human, and they loved you more for it." But Ozzy wasn't entirely convinced. "What if it happens again? What if next time I forget even more? Then we'll handle it," Chris said. "Like we did tonight. That's what being a band means. We support each other." Over the next few hours, as they packed up to leave, reports started coming in from social media. The moment had been recorded by dozens of fans. The videos were spreading rapidly, but contrary to what Ozzy had feared, the response was overwhelmingly positive. Comments flooded in from around the world.
"This is why Ozzy is a legend. He didn't pretend. He was real."
"I've been to hundreds of concerts. This moment is more memorable than than any perfect performance I've ever seen. The crowd singing with him when he forgot the words. That's what music is about.
Also showing his vulnerability made me cry.
We love you, Prince of Darkness. Music journalists who had been at the show were already writing their reviews. Rolling Stone's headline would read, Ozzy Osbourne's most powerful performance in years came when the words failed. NME wrote, in forgetting his lyrics, Ozzy reminded us why music matters. The BBC even did a segment on it, interviewing cognitive scientists about music, memory, and the power of communal experience. What happened at the O2 Arena, one professor explained, was a beautiful example of collective memory. When one person's memory fails, the group's memory sustains them. It's a fundamental human instinct to help, to support, to carry each other. In the weeks following the London concert, something unexpected happened. Other artists started talking about the incident, not as a cautionary tale, but as inspiration. Bruce Springsteen, in an interview, mentioned it. What Ozzy did took more courage than any perfect performance ever could. He showed his humanity, and the audience responded with theirs. That's the essence of rock and roll. Paul McCartney, who had known Ozzy for decades, called him personally. You reminded everyone that we're all human, Paul said. I've forgotten lyrics more times than I can count, but seeing how you handled it, how the crowd responded, it was beautiful, Ozzy. Really beautiful. Even younger artists chimed in. Billie Eilish tweeted, Ozzy Osbourne, forgetting his lyrics, and the crowd singing for him, is the most punk rock thing I've seen in years. Raw, real, perfect. The incident sparked conversations about aging performers, about Parkinson's disease, about the pressure of perfection in an age of social media and constant recording. Medical professionals praised Ozzy for being open about his condition, for showing that life goes on even with chronic illness. Support groups for Parkinson's patients reached out, asking if Ozzy would be willing to speak about his experience. The awareness raised by that one moment did more for Parkinson's education than years of traditional campaigning. But the most profound impact was on Ozzy himself. For years, he had worried that his declining health meant he was finished, that he couldn't give his fans what they deserved. That night in London changed his perspective. In a later interview for a documentary about the tour, Ozzy reflected on the experience. You know, for so long, I thought that to be a good performer, I had to be perfect. I had to hit every note, remember every word, give a flawless show. But that night in London taught me something different. It taught me that connection is more important than perfection. He paused, emotion clear in his voice. When I stood there and couldn't remember the words, I thought it was the end. I thought everyone would see that I was finished. But instead, they lifted me up. They carried me. And in doing that, they reminded me what music has always been about. People coming together, supporting each other, sharing something bigger than themselves. Sharon added her perspective. That moment was the culmination of 50 years of building trust with fans. They didn't abandon him when he was vulnerable. They showed up for him the way he's shown up for them all these years. It was the most beautiful exchange I've ever witnessed. The incident also changed how Ozzy approached the rest of the tour. He stopped trying to hide his struggles. If he needed to sit during a song, he sat. If he needed to let the band carry a verse while he caught his breath, he did. And the audiences didn't mind. If anything, they appreciated his honesty. At a concert in New York, a few weeks later, Ozzy addressed the crowd. You might have heard about what happened in London, he said. I forgot my own bloody lyrics. The crowd cheered supportively. But you know what I learned? I learned that I'm not up here alone. I'm up here with all of you. And together, we can get through anything. It became a regular part of his shows. He'd talk openly about his health challenges, about the good days and the bad days. And in doing so, he gave permission to thousands of people dealing with their own health issues to be open about their struggles too. Letters poured in from fans.
I have Parkinson's too, and seeing you continue to perform gives me hope that my life isn't over.
My father watched the video of you forgetting the lyrics. He cried. He's been dealing with early onset dementia dementia, and he's been so ashamed. Seeing that even Ozzy Osbourne struggles with memory and that it's okay meant the world to him. I'm a teacher and I showed my students the video. We had a great discussion about vulnerability, support, and what it means to be human. Thank you for that teaching moment. As the tour concluded in early 2023, Ozzy announced that it would be his final tour. His body couldn't handle the rigors of the road anymore, but he had no regrets. He had given everything he had, and his fans had given him everything in return. At the final show in his hometown of Birmingham, Ozzy performed "Mama, I'm Coming Home Again." This time, he remembered most of the words, but when he got to the second verse, he paused intentionally. He lowered his microphone and let the crowd sing. Not because he had forgotten, but because he wanted to share that moment with them again. When the song ended, he addressed the Birmingham crowd, many of whom had known him since before he was famous. 50 years ago, I was just a kid from Aston who couldn't read or write properly, who everyone thought would amount to nothing. And now here I am, at the end of a career I never dreamed I could have. I've made mistakes. God knows I've made mistakes. But I've also made music, and that music connected me to millions of people around the world. He paused, looking out at the sea of faces. That night in London, when I forgot the words, and you sang them for me, that was the moment I truly understood what I've spent my whole life doing. I've been building connections, building a community, creating something that's bigger than me, bigger than any one of us, and that's what will live on, long after I'm gone. The crowd gave him a standing ovation that lasted nearly 10 minutes. Many were crying, knowing this was goodbye to leave performances from a legend who had defined rock music for generations. Today, the video of Ozzy forgetting his lyrics at the O2 Arena has been viewed over 50 million times. It's been analyzed in music schools, discussed in psychology classes, and shared in support groups. It's become more than just a viral moment. It's become a symbol of human vulnerability, of community support, of the power of music to unite people. Medical conferences on Parkinson's disease show the clip when discussing the importance of continuing to engage in meaningful activities despite cognitive challenges. Music therapy programs use it to demonstrate the communal nature of music making. And somewhere in countless small venues and living rooms, musicians facing their own challenges, physical, mental, or emotional, watch that video and find courage. If Ozzy Osbourne, the Prince of Darkness himself, can be vulnerable on stage and turn it into something beautiful, maybe they can too. The lesson from that September night in London isn't that forgetting lyrics is good, or that mistakes don't matter. The lesson is that authenticity triumphs over perfection. That vulnerability, when met with love and support, creates connections deeper than any flawless performance ever could. Ozzy Osbourne spent 50 years being the Prince of Darkness, the wild man, the legend. But on that night in London, he became something even more important. He became human. And in doing so, he reminded every person in that arena, and everyone who watched afterward, that we're all human together. And together we can carry each other through the moments when the words fail us. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that vulnerability is strength and that community matters more than perfection, share it. Because somewhere, someone is afraid to show their struggles, afraid that admitting weakness means failure. And they need to see that even legends forget the words sometimes, and that's okay. More than okay, it's beautiful.